Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Babbling Irons channel. Myself and Mike. Today, we're going to be breaking down something that's happened over the international break. Coufal's been talking and doesn't paint a shining light on David Moyes, to say the least. And we're going to get into those quotes, break it down, and let you guys know what's happening. So, Mike, there's never, ever a quiet moment at West Ham. Even when we thought we were away from the football of international break, something's come up. And this time it's around Vladimir Coufal and the quotes he's just put out when speaking to media out in Czech Republic away on duty. The quotes have since been translated, and he's talking about the season at West Ham so far and what's happened and potentially why it's gone so wrong. And it's quite interesting, some of the points he makes out about the squad and also David Moyes in particular. So I thought it'd be good for us to kind of digest this and kind of analyze it. But have you had a chance to read them before we get into it? And kind of what was your overall gist of what he was saying? Do you think it was okay for someone to come out and say this while we're in a relegation battle?
To be honest, I didn't see much wrong with it. I know some people have said it's scathing and he's absolutely laid into Moyes. I think we've got to remember that some things sometimes get a little lost in translation. So the original context or the original, I guess, meaning behind it can sometimes be heightened. But also, he's just been honest. He's said before that he finds Moyes to be a pragmatist, and he doesn't necessarily, as a player, think that it gets the best out of him or that he completely agrees with that approach, because he likes to play aggressive, attacking football himself, and likes to get forward and so on. He doesn't like to be maybe as defensive as we have been. So I wouldn't necessarily say there's actually any kind of revelations in there or something to be concerned with. I think it's something that he said in the past, and I'm pretty sure it was last season. He also made those comments as well. So, and we were playing well at that point. So arguably there's no reason to, kind of pour over it and be concerned with it. But obviously we're in the situation we are now. He was asked for his appraisal on the manager, on our situation, and I just think he's been honest. And I kind of respect that he's been honest and he's not been robotic and he's not tried to shy away from things. He's just said it as he sees it. And I think that should be probably commended, to be honest.
Yeah, I think also, as we're going to look at specific quotes from the interview that have been translated, but there was a more bigger transcript where he kind of mentioned that interest from Bayer Leverkusen in January, how there were some negotiations that took place, but Moyes basically turned around and said, I made a mistake not playing you as much as I have this season. And, you're not going to leave now. You're going to be part of my plans for the second half of the season. Obviously, since then he got an injury, but that again, just another kind of damning statement of the approach for this season and what's happened. And, you can make a mistake as a manager, but I think the way he handles players sometimes as badly as he has done is very bad man management. And we've seen it with the likes of Fornals. We've gone into it in so many times before on this channel. So let's get into the quotes that we've kind of picked out that were kind of more specifically about Moyes and the team. So he kind of started, again, it's translated. This article is actually from football.london that came out this morning, where he labels Moyes as a pure pragmatist. Now that, again, you can take that out of context, but, he's, again, what you mentioned, he's speaking the truth. He goes on to say, the ends justify the means. I've probably never seen such an orthodox pragmatist when he has results at the expense of everything, maybe sometimes even the game. There is a lot of pressure on him, and he is putting pressure on us as well. Again, when you translate quotes like this, it can look more, damning in terms of the statement. But I think what he's trying to say there is he knows what type of manager Moyes is. He's been asked about Moyes in this interview, clearly. He said he's just a pure pragmatist. That is it, an orthodox pragmatist that, again, sacrifices maybe the results sometimes for his approach. And what did you make from that part of the comment? Because that was what kind of stood out to me from that passage. If we bring it back up here, it's the fact that he has results at the expense of everything, maybe sometimes even the game.
Yeah, I think we've discussed this before. Moyes believes football's played in moments. You can score from anything, and therefore having any really particular style is almost an irrelevance, because it's all about getting a result. a positive result, and that's the be all and end all. As a result of that, there's no real, as we've seen, there's been no real kind of way in which we're played. We've had no really distinctive style or identity, and it's just about, as we've heard from the likes of Antonio, it's all about keeping in the game and holding it tight for 70 minutes. Even if it's 1-0 down, keep it tight. Even 2-0 down, keep it tight. Stay in it until about 70 minutes, and then we'll maybe open up and go for it in the last 20 to 10 minutes. And that is it. That's the ultimate pragmatist. We just need to stay in the game, and then we can go for it when the game is most up, because that is when we need to then open up and be more expressive and be less, I guess, for lack of a better term, structured and rigid in our approach.
Do you think that approach is ever going to be sustainable for a long period of time?
I think this season proves it isn't. It's. I know others will turn around and say it's transitional. I think that, as we've said before, anyone say it's transitional is just, I just find it laughable. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, but it's just laughable because it just doesn't even look at what next season's going to be. So what's the excuse next season? Oh, it's another transitional season. Oh, we've lost Declan Rice. There's always an excuse. Any manager, any good manager, even in transitional seasons, are able to transition that team. He hasn't transitioned or guided that team through this period, or at least at this point, in any shape or form to a level that we could deem as acceptable. In transitional season, you expect to drop off, but you don't expect to drop off after spending 180 odd £million and drop off to being in a relegation fight after being in European football for the last 2 seasons. Yeah. Transitional season would, granted, be maybe sitting around mid-table because of that and the changes, but to be sitting where we're sitting, that isn't a transitional season. That's a catastrophe. And the fact that we're on the verge potentially of a relegation, again, how you can still sit there and define this as a transitional season is just beyond me. And
I think transition would be more, there'd be more weight to that argument if we were playing like a different style with the players that we brought in and our approach had slightly changed. But Coufal actually goes on to say about this. So let's move on to the next passage of the quotes where he does mention about the squad in terms of a lot of change in the summer, how to accommodate for the new additions that came in. And he kind of mentions that I can't understand it. Maybe the summer transfer window didn't suit us when a lot of new players arrived and we need time. We had a certain style that now has to be dug up and probably everything hasn't fit yet. So let's just look at that first part. Again, he's saying that we have a style that doesn't fit Moyes. There was an idea that we would transition into that more possession-oriented team, that we'd have more control over matches and we'd be less pragmatic in terms of our approach. But what he's actually said there is, no, that's not really the case. We've brought in players that are maybe misprofiled and don't fit how Moyes wants to approach matches, and it just hasn't been able to gel. And we've seen that this season.
What I find, I agree with what he's saying, but also what I find funny in that whole piece is, and he also does say there in the next piece, is that it's not actually all on the new players.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, David Moyes has given the likes of Cresswell so many chances to continue and has been terrible. It's taken 6 to 7 months to give Emerson a chance. And fans were also buying into this idea, well, he's obviously not good enough because Moyes isn't playing him. Yeah. Now they're turning around and saying he's good enough. So it just shows how fans aren't even able to form an opinion necessarily on a player's actual ability.
Similar with Downs, isn't it, really?
I know that sounds really arrogant of me to say that as well about that in terms of forming that opinion on a player, but it's also, it's almost in some cases true. It's that, well, if the manager doesn't pick him, they're not good enough. It's not as simple as that. It's not as black and white as that. And I can be quite a black and white person, as we've seen in all of these conversations over the time we've been on this channel with Sloth. But there are nuances, and the fact of the matter is, when players haven't performed, they haven't been pulled out of the squad. He's played largely exactly the same squad as the last few years. Now, people go, oh, it's transitional season. He's been embedded in players. What players is he embedded? Not really embedded, Scamacca.
You have to adapt, don't you, really? It's more about the adapting and changing. Look at the top clubs.
Changes in the league. Like the league has changed this season. Again, there's been changes. Just look at Liverpool and how they've struggled.
Yeah.
We haven't adapted our way we play. Team like, say, Brighton, they lose Cucurella. they go and get Esteban, who is almost the same player but different. But they adapt, they modify their style. Granted, new manager, but again, it's these teams that are able to adapt that have managed to thrive.
Yeah.
And Brentford, for example, same principal team, but there's miniature adaptations and changes in their team and the way that they play, which has allowed them to flourish. Same as
I mean,
Fulham.
look, as they came up the leagues, they lost Watkins, they lost Benrahma. You know, there were key players in their team that they lost, and they still developed on their model. They still developed in terms of recruitment, and you know that identity that you associate with Brighton is very clear. And you know they got the personnel that fits that. With Moyes and West Ham at the moment, the issue isn't the quality of players we have. I don't think any West Ham fan disputes that. We have enough quality in our squad to be challenging the top half of the league and on the European front. I have no doubt in my mind about that. It's just the approach, and like Coufal mentions, the pragmatic approach just doesn't suit them. And you know, he said, I mean, he also said in the quote that it's putting a lot of pressure on the players but he also, you know, Moyes also has a lot of pressure on him as well. So he understands the pressure that the manager has, but it's feeding into that squad, and the pressure they're playing with now is huge. And it's become a situation where every match now is going to be a huge pressure match because of the position we're in.
Every game's a must win. From here on out, it's almost must win. You know, we play Southampton. If we don't win, Moyes will likely remain. So again, the next game is must win. So every game for Moyes becomes a must win game, which then feeds into the players. Then you also feeds into where we are in the table. So then again, every game is literally a must win, because not only does it secure his potential future as a manager, also means is looking to secure our future in the Premier League. So it's that double down piece. So as he gets more tension and more stress, he's going to put that on the team. But also, the more tension he has, the more rigid he's going to be in his approach, because I can't afford to lose a game. So we become even more defensive.
Yeah.
And we've seen that this year. The attitude that we can't lose games has actually seen us lose games.
Yeah.
And I think you summed it up perfectly when you said players have been misprofiled. And the fact of the matter is, the manager has the inability in which to profile players, even after seeing them after a few training sessions. The ridiculous thing of consistently trying to play Paqueta as a 10 and leaving him isolated, playing Scamacca isolated and not bringing players in around him and thinking, I'll just lump it up to him and play it like I do with Antonio. He just doesn't understand how to work with certain players and certain types of players.
Yeah.
And it's taken nearly, obviously, 8 months to work out that, Paqueta's actually number 8. And yet he said when we signed him, he is the profile of an 8, profile of a 10, and even as a false 9. Now, if you have a player who has all of those combinations, you also look at a team and go, well, where do I most need to improve? If I want to be a possession-based team, where do I need a creative player who works hard off the ball and actually manages to link play? Well, I need him playing centrally, but instead he plays him up top into a place where we don't play players. And it's like, he's not a Lingard. So you can't just...
That's what he wanted, isn't it? You know, throughout the summer, he wanted a Lingard type 10, and he didn't get it. And, you know, the big money move was there for Paqueta, and it's, again, misprofile. But let's get into what Coufal said in that second part of the quotes about kind of the squad. You know, he kind of says, I'm definitely not saying that it's only the newcomers' fault. So he does say that, you know, it's not just them. In addition, we stopped scoring goals. We conceded a lot simply after our own mistakes. However, no one admits that we should not manage the season. Now, again, the translation's a bit iffy there, but basically what he's saying is we stopped scoring goals. You know, we became a team from the past 2 seasons that were free scoring. You know, last season we scored in every home game. You know, we had moments where we beat teams 3-1, 4-1 away from home. I mean, Aston Villa, Watford. And, you know, in home matches, we scored 3 against Liverpool. We scored 3 against Chelsea. You know, but scoring goals was never an issue for us because we had the pragmatic approach, but we also had killer instinct in moments in matches, which Moyes likes to kind of go off. And this season, we just haven't had it because we haven't utilised the squad in a way that can do that. You can't continue to play the same way with different players and expect the same outcome. And I think that's what Moyes has expected. And
play the same way and also set the defence 10 yards further back.
Yeah.
You can't expect to play good counter-attacking football when the rest of the league is adding pace and you add none. You can't expect to have a resilient defence when you go and buy injury-prone players or you allow injury-prone players to be part of the makeup of your defence. you can't play possession football if you don't address the fact that you have a fundamental lack of ability in one of your players to hold possession and make 5-yard passes. So you kind of look at it and go, yes, the players have to take a good level of responsibility. So does the manager.
Yeah.
And, Coufal making a point, it's not all on the newcomers. No, it's not, because we also have heard rumours that newcomers have come in and it's put players' noses out of face, and they've acted like petulant children. One of those being a centre forward who's now, seemingly a bit more happy because he seems to be scoring a couple of goals and playing a bit more. But also we've seen players haven't played well because their noses were out of joint. They felt under pressure. The first time they had a bit of a pressure in the past 2 years actually on their roles, they buckled.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't handle it. And
they
didn't like the fact that they now had to fight for their place. So it just shows the mentality of some of our squad. And some of our squad's mentality was weak, in my opinion. They
I think
under the pressure of actually having to compete for their spot and didn't like it.
I think from what he kind of said there, just to kind of summarize, is basically saying that there's a lot of pressure on the manager. He admits that himself, but that pressure's feeding onto the players. And I think that is really showing on the pitch, and it's shown this season, because how many times this season before it's got to this point have we seen players come out and say we're too good to go down? We're not in a relegation battle. I mean, Declan Rice was one of them that did it. I remember we were near the bottom maybe a few months ago, and he said, we're not in a relegation battle. Come on, like a couple wins, we'll be back up there. Still 18th in March, going into April. So there's that arrogance there that we're better than we think we are. There's a lot of issues in terms of the approach to matches, which Coufal himself has highlighted is clearly an issue, because I'm sure he's not the only one that has that opinion from the squad, and he's just come out and said it in an interview. So I don't think it's just him. I think there are other players that do agree with him in terms of the pragmatic approach, which undoubtedly has been one of the consequences of our season. And just embedding the new players, just misprofiling. And, like we mentioned, Paqueta, thinking he's more of a 10 than an 8 when you first sign him. And you only just realised a few months later that maybe he's better as an 8. It's crazy. And, players like Fornals have been at the club for how long? Still playing out on the left, still playing as a winger. It's not just him. So I think overall, from what Coufal said, I don't think there's anything too outlandish. I mean, he's spoken his truth. There has been a bit of a communication thing with the translation, but overall, he's just said it how it is. Like, no one would really disagree with that. I don't think anyone looking outside in would disagree with Coufal.
In all honesty, the most interesting thing in the entire piece was David Kaczynski, the future owner of West Ham.
Yeah,
that is the piece we should concentrate on.
Again, that could be mis kind of communicated in translation,
or it could be the fact that that's the feeling inside the club. That could be the fact that is what's been told to the players, is that Krasinski is going to be looking to take over the club. Yeah. Not necessarily as a full 100% ownership, but he will be looking to run the club. He will be the future of the club. Obviously, there's no time frame on that. But in my opinion, it also feeds into, again, we may be looking at this because it's something we've talked about, but it does feed into the idea that we've already stated many times that time is running up on the incumbents, the custodians, as they put it, for the last few years. And this is known within the squad that changes are coming. Because he then makes point, I'm not on the boards, but I don't know what's happening with Moyes, because he deflects that comment and asks about Moyes' future. But he doesn't back him, doesn't say that Moyes needs to stay. So again, it's a very telling point as to, look, I'm not on the board. I don't know what their future plans are. I don't know if they're going to look to keep him. And then kind of there's a mention around Krasinski and him being obviously the future owner. But what's very telling out of all of that point, where he's just very honest, very, I'd say, professional, I don't think he talks out of turn, doesn't give excuses. He gives explanations, I would say. But what's very telling is when asked around the, I guess, the long-term future or the future of the manager, he doesn't back him, doesn't state that, he's the right man for the job. He is the person to guide us and see us through. He says, as a squad, we think we are fine to get out of it. And he doesn't make mention at any point in there that he believes that Moyes is the right man and his style is going to keep us up, and that he is a man that is favoured by the board. Simply just makes a kind of a comment as to, I'm not getting involved in this conversation. That's what it is. He does obviously comment positively on Moyes when in terms of bringing him back into the fold.
Yeah.
As you've mentioned, shows the poor man management. You had a player out of form, you dropped him out, you were then willing to sell him, and then at the moment you realise you could lose him and you were struggling because you kept messing around with that back line.
Yeah.
You then go, actually, I need you. Can you come back in? And then you put your arm around him, rather than when he's out of form. You're doing it when he's about to leave, which just again shows what type of manager we have. It's a manager who's only interested in what could be going, rather than what is actually there. And only then does he feel, oh, maybe I should actually put my arm around him because I actually need him now. So now I'm going to actually start to call him in. It just again shows that, and football is quite disposable, but it also just shows his disposable attitude to players in that you were out of form, didn't need you or didn't want you, and in the moment others were out of form, and I actually felt like I needed you and wanted you again, got my arm around you and told you I love you very deeply. You're never going to leave. Even if you're out the door, I'm going to grab onto your leg and hold you. You know, it's just where is that level of management throughout? Because if Coufal turned his season round basically since that, I guess, come to Jesus moment and started playing a lot better. So where's that attitude been with other players? Because I'm sure if other players maybe got the same level of encouragement and I guess view that they're almost indispensable to that manager, their form would have also improved. So it just kind of makes me question the overall man management if that's the approach to a player when they're looking to leave. Why are you not just? Why is that not your standard approach to all your players, making them feel indispensable, making them feel, you know, as if they're wanted and a big part of your plans?
It definitely feels like there's the environment at the moment is really bad in the dressing room and behind the scenes. So we'll see what happens in the next couple of months. But let us know what you guys think in the comments anyway about the whole situation with Coufal and what he said. Do you think it's fair for him to come out and say this when we're in the situation we're in? Do you think maybe he should just keep things a little bit closer to home while we're struggling? Let us know in the comments. Leave a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you are new around here. And Mike, one thing for us left to say.
Yep.
Come on, you on.